We appreciate you for joining us for the launch of WeBudget. Before we begin, I'd like to share some housekeeping rules. First, this webinar is being recorded, so we'll share it and it'll be accessible afterwards. Second, there are two functions I'd like to introduce you folks to. The first one is the chat function, which you can provide general comments throughout the presentation. Be sure to hit all panelists and attendees so we can all sort of see the rich conversations that are happening. And the second function is for specific questions. Throughout the presentation, you all will see specific issues that may come up for you about the data, about packaging information. We'd love to hear that. After each section, we'll spend some time trying to address a few questions, but by end of this presentation, we'll gather all of them and send the email out with answers for each. Lastly, I'd like to also introduce myself and my colleagues. So again, my name is Asad Beg, and I'm with the Advancement Project. And I'd like to introduce you to the panelists who will be joining us for the launch of WeBudget. So I'm joined by my colleagues at the Advancement Project California, Mike Russo, Jackie Guerrero, and Leila Forzan. Mike is a managing director. Jackie Guerrero is our director of equity and community investments program area. And Leila Forzan is a senior data and research analyst with our research and data analysis team. We're also joined by our panelists who have been key partners in developing the website, providing a strong framework and a voice for parents and students throughout this presentation. I'd like to introduce Mark Wilson, Director of Operations and Strategy for the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools. Griselda Perez, she's an LAUSD parent, also working with the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools. Miguel Dominguez, Director of Youth Programs from Community Coalition, and Laura Zavala, who's the Director of Policy and Campaign Development at Inner City Struggle. Everyone will be available for a panelist discussion afterwards, and feel free to connect with folks throughout the presentation as well. Thank you for your time. I'm going to pass it over now to my colleague, Mike, who will get us started.
Great, thanks so much, Asad, and thank you all for joining us this morning. As Asad said, we know there is a lot happening at this moment. This is certainly not the moment that we thought we would be launching WeBudget into when we first conceived of the idea. And I just wanted to, again, thank you all for sharing the morning with us amidst so much that's going on, and also just acknowledge everything that's happening right now. Obviously, the COVID pandemic has been impacting all of our work and personal lives. It's had a significant impact, obviously, on students across the state, including at LAUSD, moving everybody into distance learning and leaving it's still unclear what the fall is going to look like once we start opening up again. Obviously, the pandemic has led to a recession and deficit challenges are confronting the state and districts, including LAUSD. And providing a glimmer of hope, but also bringing a lot of attention to a longstanding issue of injustice in our society is the folks who've been on the streets calling for justice and an end to public violence, and specifically police violence against folks of color, and especially against the Black community. And one thing that all of these challenges and moments have in common is that in every case, it's low-income people of color, and again, especially the Black community, who are at the center and generally most impacted by the injustices and the disparities that we're seeing and are really being brought to our attention to confront. And at Advancement Project, our view is that's not accidental. That's how we've designed our public systems. And the path towards equity is a path that runs through systems change. And we do need to take what we've built, what we've inherited, and build equity into it so that we can really start seeing some more just outcomes. And it's also not something that can be done just by experts and just with data alone. We know that navigating all of these overlapping crises and getting to a strong, equitable recovery that reimagines a California that ultimately works for all of us requires communities and advocates to have their voices heard. So many of these challenges are the result of folks making decisions without really knowing what the impacts are, or being as closely connected to the communities that rely on public services or are most in need of some support or most held down by some of the challenges that disparities create. And that really is why we're here this morning and why we created WeBudget. Again, it's been long in gestation because LAUSD, as we all know, is a key engine for equity for LA as a whole. There's a lot at stake in making sure that the district is as effective as it possibly can in trying to ease some of the disparities that communities inherit and give students, especially students of color, what they need to be on a path towards better education, better integration into their communities, with psychological and personal support as they enter adulthood and can really thrive and be the huge asset for LA that we all know that students of color can be. And obviously there's been equity work happening at the district for a long, long time, both by advocates and folks pushing for reform within the district. So certainly want to acknowledge that there's been a lot of progress made, and we'll try to highlight some of that progress this morning. But we also know that a lot of these reforms run through the budget, and there are both opportunities and challenges that have to do with budgeting. First, obviously, even before COVID and the recession, LAUSD did confront long-term financing challenges and issues around, adequacy of funding. Obviously, the recession has only made that more challenging. And at the same time, a lot of the positive reforms like the Student Equity Needs Index and the innovation funds from the lawsuit settlement a couple of years ago have pushed more and more funding and decision-making down to school sites and thrown, even more light on the ways that there are, needs across the district, but a lot of schools are concentrated in really, especially high need schools that have a lot of overlapping challenges they're trying to deal with all at once, and that they require more funding and more resources in order to engage with. But at the same time, while there are some avenues for parents and community members and advocates to get involved in district level decision making, it can be even more challenging to have those conversations at the school site level. And a lot of the challenges I know are very familiar to all of us. Budgeting has a lot of jargon, a lot of overly technical information and language that often makes it hard to have common conversations based on the same understood set of facts. There are formal budget processes, but again, they can be very unfriendly to folks who are trying to participate. And there's often a lack of clarity over who's in charge of which pots of dollars and where that funding can go to, due to the fact that the board, the superintendent and administration, and individual school principals and school site councils all play a role in budget decision making. So even as the need for more engagement and more community voice in budgeting was rising, some of these barriers we think became even more, even a bigger deal. So WeBudget is our attempt to provide some support to help get through some of those barriers and create more of a community voice and more collaboration around moving equity in the LAUSD budget. We'll go through what's in the site in pretty good detail through the course of the webinar, and also let you know what the URL is so you can start playing with it yourselves. The main pieces which we'll go through are first some budget basics that provide a little bit of the budget 101 for folks who want to get more involved but need a bit more grounding in the history of school budgeting in California, the context that LAUSD operates in, and some big picture information about where the district's money comes from and goes. As well as some advocacy tips for folks who are trying to, raise up their own personal experience or the experience of their kids and connect that with decision makers within the district. Then a lot of the data and the meat of the site comes through in the district level and school specific profiles that we've created. So this has information on funding and academic outcome and community indicators for the schools within the district, including state preschool and early education centers as well. And again, this provides a look at what's happening district-wide, but also for folks who are really engaged in advocacy at their specific school, an understanding of how things are playing out, just at that school. Lastly, for folks who want to sort of analyze trends and compare different kinds of schools or different schools across the district, we also allow for searching and sorting of data of all the different schools in the district, which hopefully can help shine a spotlight on the places that equity actually is, being infused into what LAUSD is doing, as well as lifting up some of the places where there are still some challenges, some implementation issues, and challenges that do need to be resolved. And finally, we're very proud that it's offered entirely in both in English and Spanish. Something we heard loud and clear from the folks we worked with that was going to be really critical. So we're hopeful it can be useful for many of the communities in LAUSD through that language access. And again, I mean, we're sharing with you today. We hope it's useful to you all. We hope that advocates will be able to use it to find information to support your understanding of where there are equity issues and connect anecdotes and specific cases you're seeing to potentially broader systemic opportunities or challenges. And understand how resources are being used across the district, but also really by parents and students who are trying to understand what's happening at their school site and have more productive conversations with principals and other leaders at the schools. And finally, I think it will hopefully be valuable because it's providing a baseline so that, as we'll talk through in more detail, this is the current school year, which is just ending, the budget for that, which obviously is a before picture in many respects. We know a lot is changing because of COVID. A lot more will change due to the recession and the budget that will be voted on and revisited over the coming weeks and months. And so hopefully this can provide a measuring stick to figure out, as changes are proposed, as there are potentially cuts, potentially new opportunities, to understand what was working, what wasn't working, and what needs to be protected and actually needs to be built on. So before diving in, also, I wanted to just quickly say a few words of thanks to the folks who helped get us to this point. First, we benefited from amazing partners. Many of them are joining us on this call, but I wanted to specifically shout out to Community Coalition, Inner City Struggle, the Partnership for LA Schools, as well as MALDEF and the ACLU of Southern California. They provided a lot of awesome feedback and great thinking about what kind of data they already use and how to present that data in ways that would be impactful. And they also helped connect us to some of the parents and youth that they organize and work with so that we could ground our work in their experience and their advocacy as well. So huge kudos to them. We would not have developed something that hopefully does meet folks' needs without those connections. I also wanted to thank a lot of the folks in the district who supported us as well. We're providing a lot of data, and it's all publicly available data that LAUSD does make available to anybody who wants it, which is a real credit to the district. So shout out to many of the board members' offices, folks in the superintendent's office, and especially the budget department and the open data team within LAUSD who answered a lot of our questions, connected us to folks within the district who had data or knew the answers, and really helped us move ahead and were supportive of our work. We really appreciate that. And then finally, to our funders, the WM Keck Foundation and First 5 LA both generously supported this work. And again, we wouldn't be here without their early investment in this project and the promise that it hopefully holds out. So let me stop there and turn it over to Layla to start showing off what we've pulled together.
Thank you, Mike, and good morning, everyone. I'm just going to take a moment here to share my screen. Okay, so hopefully everyone is seeing the homepage of the WeBudget site right now. And before I walk you through one of the school profiles, I just want to take a moment to give you an idea of how we got to this point. Mike alluded to that, but basically, many months ago, Advancement Project California staff had conversations with community-based partners that Mike mentioned to help form the initial list of indicators that we were going to use for the project. The result of those conversations was combined with indicators vetted through Advancement Project's own research. Once we formed that initial list of data, we held 2 focus group sessions, one with the partner organizations and one with parents and activists, again, with the help of those organizations. And we presented the initial list of 30 indicators along with much of the other information you'll find on the site as well. And so through that process, we narrowed our list down to the 22 data points that you will see on the site today. And during those sessions, we also discuss the types of visuals that are best suited for each indicator and the ways to present this that would be the most impactful. So now I'm going to walk through the school profile. So the first thing you'll want to do is navigate to WeBudgetLA.org. Once you're there, you'll click on All Schools and find My School. And here you'll be able to just start typing in the name of the school you're interested in. So for our example today, I'm going to select Manual Arts High School. And here we have the profile. So at the top of each profile, you're going to see the school's name, of course, followed by some general information. So we have school type, in this case, it's a high school. We have the board district, the school is in Board District 1. You'll see whether or not the school is a charter or a magnet. In this case, it is a magnet school, has a magnet program. And you'll also see if the school offers transitional kindergarten. In this case, no, since it's a high school. Directly below that, you'll find helpful links to print out the complete profile that you see here or download it as a file. You can also quickly share on Facebook and Twitter. Below that, you'll see some more general information, so total school enrollment, as well as total funding per student. And we'll get into the funding a little bit later, more details on that. Below this, you'll see the Student Equity Need Index need category of the school. In this case, Manual Arts falls into the highest need category. So a little background on that. When California approved the local control funding formula in 2013, Los Angeles parents, students, and advocates expected a good amount of equity funds to go to the highest need schools. This funding formula did provide a statewide framework for districts, but it did not specify implementation at the local level, at the district level. So because of that lack of specificity, local advocates, including Community Coalition, Inner City Struggle, and Advancement Project California, organized to successfully push Los Angeles Unified School District to ensure that the revenue brought in by the district's high-need students actually reached those students through this Student Equity Need Index, or Seni. The second iteration of this index, the Seni 2.0, was adopted in 2018. Seni 2.0 takes into consideration community factors such as exposure to gun violence and asthma severity rates, which allows schools to address historic trauma that students experience outside of the school environment, and that can have a substantial negative impact on their ability to learn, especially in communities of color. The index also measures the target student populations highlighted in the local control funding formula itself, and those groups are foster youth, English language learners, and low-income students. The index includes, in addition, many of the more traditional measures of English language arts proficiency, math and English language arts proficiency, graduates meeting A through G requirements, and so on. Finally, this index score is used to categorize schools from lowest to low, moderate, high, and highest need, with the intention that schools receive LCFF or local control funding formula funding based on their need level. Again, as we see here, Manual Arts High School falls into the highest need category. The next section you'll see is the overview. So here, again, you'll see the total enrollment, this time accompanied by enrollment by race. We have included data disaggregated by race whenever possible. And as you hover over each bar on the chart, you'll see the percentage of students in each group. So we can see that nearly 83% of students at Manual Arts are Latinx, while over 14% are Black. This is followed by additional indicators of student demographics, including the percentage of students with disabilities, students experiencing homelessness, and the local control funding formula targeted student populations, again, that were used for Seni 2.0 and more. Just a note here, the percentage of high-need students can be more than 100% because the same student may be counted in more than one category. So that's true in the case of Manual Arts High School. In addition, we have included the ratio of students per teacher, students per nurse and healthcare worker, and students per social emotional support staff. So these data points are examples of where we have provided a best rate for comparison. By looking at the bar chart, we can see that Manual Arts High School, represented by the blue bar, has more students per social emotional support staff than the best performing high school in the district. The best rate schools that we provide are always the best rate among schools of the same type. So we're comparing high school to high school and so on. I also want to point out that best rate in this case means fewer students per staff member, so lower rate. In other cases, best may be the highest rate, such as for graduation. Next, we have the funding section. And to calculate our funding estimates, we use the district's school spending reports, which, as Mike mentioned, are available online to anyone who would like to see them. And we have calculated total and per student funding figures in 5 categories, which include total funding that you see here. This covers almost all of the funds the school receives, with a few exceptions. This was the most popular request from parents and advocates, and for this indicator, it was important that we excluded some funding streams, such as bond dollars, because they are one-time investments that come in at various points in time. We didn't want to artificially inflate a school's funding level because it's not what they see during normal years. As the LAUSD budget is large and complex, you can quickly find the specific program codes that we included in each of these funding categories by clicking on the I tool here in the upper right corner. And more generally, this feature will show you the data source, year, and the methodology we use for each data point you do see on the site. So total funding is followed by discretionary funding. And this is really the portion of funds that a principal has control over. This type of funding comes from the targeted student program through Seni, through innovation, and so on, and also federal Title I and III grants, which provide the schools with the most flexibility. This is part of the reason why the victory of the Seni campaign was so critical. We've included discretionary funding based on our research and conversations with advocates and school administrators. So as WeBudget was created for parents and advocates to use in their conversations with principals and school administrators, we wanted them to know how much of the budget the principal and the administration really has control over. So while these dollars represent only a portion of the school's total funding, they are still significant enough to make a difference at a school site. After this, you'll see funding allocated specifically through the Seni, which is a portion of discretionary funding. This is followed by total academic funding, and this category is largely pulling from the district's general fund school program code, which they use to allocate resources for teachers, administrators, materials, supplies, and more across the schools in the district. And finally, the last category is special education funding. This is a top priority for many parents, especially those who have children with disabilities, and our approach to defining this category was largely the same. We went through all of the program codes to identify those that were linked to special education and pulled them in for our estimate here. Just a brief look at what those codes are. And here I'd also like to point out that you can download all of the bar charts on this school profile individually by clicking on the 3 lines here in the upper right corner of the charts. And so it's available in a couple different formats. So that's in addition to downloading or printing the entire school profile as one. The next category we have is academic indicators. So probably many of you are familiar with these. And as we know, COVID-19 has impacted students through distance learning and the difficulties that poses. And in addition to the inability of schools to conduct the testing that they usually do each year, and more. So the data you see here is mainly from last year's test results, and we'll have to see how things unfold this year and next. So here we have data on English language arts proficiency, and that is both available as the total rate here, seen here above the chart, and then disaggregated by race below in the bar chart. We also have math proficiency, in addition to English learners reclassified it as English proficient. Each year we have the student high school graduation rate, as well as the percentage of students who plan on obtaining a college degree. And this comes from the district's own student experience survey. Okay, and the last category we have is school climate and community. So school climate can be defined in a few ways, but generally it is the feelings and attitudes that are elicited by a school's environment. As such, school climate can be difficult to assess. We have included 3 related data points here on WeBudget. So the first is the chronic absenteeism rate. This includes students who miss 10% or more of school days they were expected to attend. This is another example of data available disaggregated by race. And so here we can see that manual arts has a relatively high chronic absenteeism rate with nearly 34% of students, or 1 in 3 students, being chronically absent. The bar chart shows us that on top of that, there are large disparities among students on this indicator. White students are least likely to be chronically absent, followed by Latinx students, and then finally Black students. We have suspension rates as well, overall and disaggregated by race. And here we see that manual arts has a very low suspension rate, which is great, but still disparities between students persist. The third school climate indicator is the percent of students who feel safe at school. And again, this is measured through the district's own school experience survey. And so here we can see that less than half of students feel safe at school. And the last set of indicators relates to the community. And so we all know that what happens outside of school walls affect a child's education. And the following community indicators were vetted through this project with the partners mentioned earlier, along with parents, and is similar to the data that is used in Seni 2.0 to address community factors. So first we have the youth asthma hospitalization rate, which speaks to access to health care and management of chronic conditions, speaks to missed classroom time for students, and also environmental impacts on health. And lastly, we have the gun injury hospitalization rate. And so this is indicative of students' exposure to violence in the community and the need for trauma-informed education. And so that's the end of the data portion, but we also do include at the bottom of each profile a locator map showing where the school is, along with its address, a link to that school's website if available, as well as the phone number. And the last thing I'll say is about, again, about comparing data. So here I've shown you that you can compare data from your selected school to the school with the best rate in the district. And you can also look at data disaggregated by race and groups of students within the school. One more way to compare data is to compare to a district average. And so I won't go through this now, but if you scroll back to the top of the page and click on district profile, you'll see most of the same data in a very similar profile for the whole district as a whole. And you can also select within that to view a profile for school type in the district. So you can see a profile for all early education center and preschools, or a profile for all high schools in the district. And with that, we can open it up to some questions. Asad.
Thanks for that, Layla. We've got a few questions here, so I'll let the panelists decide what works. The first question we have is, do you have data on non-geographic populations, such as American Indian / Native Alaskan Native students?
That's a great question. Where possible, we have provided that. So unfortunately, most of this data comes from the district itself, and they do mask some data to protect privacy of students when there are low numbers. And so as we know, many cases, some of these populations are very small, and so those data are masked, unfortunately. It's likelier that they'd be available on the district profile page than maybe in a school profile page, because again, at the district level, the numbers may be large enough. Frequently I would say enrollment would be a place that more populations would be available, as you see here in total student enrollment. But yeah, unfortunately, many of the others, the small populations are masked for privacy.
Great, thanks. I think we have time for a few more. So the next question I think everyone's asking about is there guidance for principals on how they can use discretionary funding in more equitable ways?
I would refer that question to either to someone on our Equity and Community Funds team, Equity and Community Investments team, or one of the partners here. I think would be best place to probably answer.
I think we'll probably touch base on that in the next section.
Great, thanks, Jackie. Let's try and capture one more. Is there going to be a mechanism or a future effort to collect qualitative data points or stories around indicators? And as part of a broader question of the outreach numbers, community engagement processes that we maybe aren't necessarily touching on that we could do in future years?
That's a great question. I think, again, maybe somebody is going to capture that a little bit later, or I don't know if maybe Jackie, if you want to speak to that, or Mike.
Yeah, I'll actually kick it over to Mike as well.
Sure. I would say our focus with WeBudget has been to focus on more quantitative data and provide that to folks who are doing qualitative research and more working directly with folks at the school level. I think we all know LAUSD is very large, and both quantitative and qualitative data is going to vary a lot based on which communities and which school sites you're in. And so we certainly wouldn't want to say that we're positioning this as a replacement for that really important, impactful work, but hopefully it can inform folks who are working at a set of schools in a specific community, are doing surveys, doing story collection, that this can provide a quantitative grounding that then can be used to make clear that as they're lifting up anecdotes, as they're lifting up qualitative data, that it reflects systemic issues and it's reflected in underlying quantitative data as well. And I'd say that's partially why we are so grateful to our partners who do a lot more of that work, and we're able to hopefully give us some guidance on what kinds of information would be useful to those kinds of efforts.
Great. We have one more, and then we'll move on to the next section. And this question is the best rate comparison based on all similar grade level schools in LAUSD or by district region? What is the quickest way to find bright spots in high need schools?
Okay, two very good questions. So the quote unquote best rate school, or schools could be more than one, depending on the indicator, is a school of the same type that you have selected. So if you've selected to look at an elementary school profile, the best rate will be the elementary school or schools with the best rate in the whole district. So it's not geographically based, it's based on the match of grade levels. In other words, the grade levels or school type, right? And so we provide, we have 4 different types of schools on this site, which are early education and care sites and preschools. We have elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, as well as what are referred to as span schools sometimes, that may go anywhere between kindergarten to 12th at the same school. So those are the types that are available, and those would be where the comparisons come from. And the second question about identifying the bright spots in highest need schools, that would probably be best done through the all schools table, which is also under this all schools link at the top of the page. And I believe Mike will delve more into that later on in the discussion.
Great. Thanks for that, Layla. If you have any questions, feel free to continue asking them in the Q&A section, and we can curate them as we go along. And we'll also send along a little Q&A sheet afterwards. I'd like to pass it along to my colleague.
And thank you, Assad, and thank you, Layla. That was a great run through of the school site profile. So I'm going to go next into another feature that we have provided for WeBudget. It's the budget basics section, and this section is actually really important. One thing that we heard frequently from when we talked to parents and advocates was being able to provide individuals with a historical context for why we're at the situation, and then also key tools they can use in their advocacy at the school site level. So that section is called Budget Basics on the website, and so you can click on that, and we also have a link to the glossary where we provide various definitions. The other thing too I want to point out is that if you click on the Español button, you will actually see all of the content in here translated into Spanish. And so this is really critical, again, because there's a large population of students and their parents at the district who are Spanish speakers. And so, they're often, most engaged at the school site level. And so we wanted to be able to provide them with resources they could use at the school site. And so other features of this page, because there's quite a bit of content on here, is that we wanted to provide individuals abilities to go to specific sections of this page so that they could dive deeper into some of the content. And so we have here how we got here, a historical context button that I'll talk about briefly. There's a get to know LAUSD, and this provides us with some high level details of the district overall. You can also go deeper into the budget process itself. And so in this section, we dive into the budget process, both for how the district derives their budget and then how individual school sites make their budgets. Then we also talk about, and look into more deeply in the district budget. We also provide a snapshot of the LCAP budget for LAUSD. And then we also provide resources for how to advocate at the school site. So those are some of the features. So if you were to click on how we got here, you would then be taken to that section. And so, one thing that we wanted to be able to provide was that historical context as to why we're in the situation we're in now, where we see districts really struggling with not receiving enough funding. We break it out in terms of the state's role in state education financing, and provide that history of where we were before and then what's led to where we're at now. There's a lot of text in here. We try to keep it quick and short. But I do want to bring us to, again, Proposition 13 and the big role that played in really limiting the amount of funds that schools, districts, or the state could raise for school districts. And so, again, this is pretty significant piece of information because, there's efforts now underway to try to reform parts of that Prop 13 so that way there is more funding for school sites. So, again, really good historical information. We try to keep it short for folks to be able to digest. Here, we also break down what LCFF is. It's actually, we all know it can be quite complicated for a lot of folks to understand. And so we try to break it down into major important components where we talk about how it was meant to provide equity, at least for the districts, more transparency, long-term planning, and parent engagement. And so the other really unique feature about this as well is if individuals want to know, well, what are high need students? How do we define them? If you click on that button, it would take you to the glossary right to that section. And so where we felt like more context was needed, we would provide it on the site. You continue to go down. There's also this feature here that will take you right back up to the page that we felt was helpful, so you didn't have to continue scrolling up. The other thing I want to bring your attention to is, again, the get to know LAUSD feature where we try to bring out the important highlights here of the district. The other thing I wanted to bring your attention to was the Seni Map. So Layla talked a lot about the Student Equity Needs Index. Here we provided the map where we actually broke out the index and provided a view of where those highest need schools are in the district. And so here, for parent advocates, you can see, that a lot of them are concentrated in the southern parts of the district. So I won't go too in depth with the rest of the site. I did just want to go back to the section of the budget advocates. Here, folks asked, well, how can individuals advocate at the school site? And so we really felt like it was important to provide this information. You can see here that we break down who some of the key decision makers are at local schools. And we even provide tips for how they can derive, a specific ask. We think parent engagement is critically important in this process of schools, using those discretionary dollars to respond to student needs. And parents and students are some of the key individuals who actually have answers to how to actually best respond to student needs, right? And so we want to, again, provide more ability to those parents and those students with ways to how to, craft their ask and know who to tell, and give them tips as well as like what to say. Really, encourage you all to look at this feature. We try to make it as accessible as possible by providing these buttons and then the quick access, which if you're more interested on a specific subject, you can go directly to that subject. So I'll kick it over to Mike where he can talk a little bit more about our other features.
Great, thanks, Jackie. And I wanted to quickly walk through the All Schools table, which I think responds to some of the questions that we've seen come up in the Q&A and the chat. So this is a tool that we built that enables you to quickly kind of see how each individual school compares to others and see what's happening across, many different schools in the district. So some of those questions about figuring out, well, where are the bright spots, what's going on with high and highest need schools. Hopefully this table can be a powerful tool to help advocates and others who are trying to get their arms around those questions and see where there are good practices to build on or places where there are opportunities to do better. So just I'll walk through a quick example. We were looking at manual arts at high school before. We can look at all the different high schools in the district. We can look in different districts of LAUSD. We can sort just by different Seni ratings. And then we can look at any of the indicators that are on the site. So I know we were looking at Student Equity Need Index funding. So just to kind of show what that looks like, sort from the top down. So this is all the high schools. We can display them all at once just to take a look. And as you can see, you can kind of see how they're stacking up in terms of per student funding under Seni, how that lines up with the need index level. And where they're geographically located by board district. And let's see, we were looking for manual arts. We can punch that in here and see it. So yeah, it was 1264. So we can see that kind of puts it, more or less middle of the pack. Let's see, where is it? There we go. And it's a highest need school, but it's not actually near the top. And that's partially because folks may know Seni 2.0, the district's new need index, replaced an earlier version, 1.0, which had substantially less equity built into it. And this year, the district held harmless schools so that schools that were lower need and would see their allocations decrease in the new version of Seni were actually held harmless. And the impact of that is that some schools are getting higher amounts under Seni, even though they are moderate or lower need, and some higher need schools aren't necessarily rising to the top. So I think this helps surface one of the challenges of implementation and tees up a really important question about what happens with Seni and with the hold harmless moving forward. And similarly, if we look at discretionary funding on a per student basis and do this the same thing, we can see that manual arts actually does a bit better on this front. So let's see, there we go, 5270. Whoops, I haven't sorted it yet. That's why it wasn't visible. So we can see here it is, it's much closer to the top. That's largely because of the innovation funds that manual arts gets, which was the settlement from the lawsuit. So that's providing a lot of additional discretionary funding, which is making a difference on the ground for students at that school, and partially making up for the fact that its Seni allocation isn't as high, relatively speaking. And again, what happens with those funds next year with the settlement agreement starting to time out, and with obviously conversations about how the district is going to respond to COVID and potentially reduced resources and different needs. These are really critical questions in terms of what things are going to look like at high need schools like manual arts. So that's why we're hopeful this data can be of use. Okay, let me pause there. I think we might have time for one quick question before we move on to hear from our partners.
Thanks, Mike. Let me look at some of the questions. So let's see here. We have one about how will you update the data in future years?
Yeah, I can take that. It's a really good question. We've tried to build the site so that we can slot new years of data in fairly easily. That all happens fairly straightforwardly on the back end. So as next year's budget data does come in and all the indicators get updated, we're hopeful that we'll be able to slot that in so that folks will have the most up-to-date information.
Great, thanks. We'll now transition over to our next section where we'll get some insights And so the first speaker we have is Laura Zavala from Inner City Struggle. Laura, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Zavala. I am the Director of Policy and Campaign Development at Inner City Struggle. We're a community-based organization in the east side of Los Angeles. And for the past 8 years of myself working with Inner City Struggle, ICS has been around for over 25 years. My focus has included working with young folks and parents around educational justice campaigns related to full service community schools, elimination of punitive discipline policies, comprehensive school-based wellness centers, local control funding, and other local and statewide policy regarding education and racial justice, while also connecting grassroots organizing strategies with advocacy and policy development. So as Eastside youth and parents fought to pass an equity-based funding formula, the Student Equity Needs Index, the first version in 2014, and then later in addition to or adding the community indicators in 2018, it was important to lift up data that revealed the lack of investments in our community and schools. Just wanted to highlight the importance of access to key data really helped augment the stories and experiences that our young people and families have experienced for several years as a result of disinvestment in schools and communities, right? And thus, it's become a tool, data in itself, to advance our organizing efforts for equitable school funding and to really, again, not as a standalone, but to augment the stories, the qualitative information and data that our community members bring to the table. And so just, reflecting in terms of like the WeBudget platform, really allowing for youth and parents to access and make meaning of school site and district budgets, right, as another tool to organize and advocate for educational justice. So as we, continue to see, this is just the beginning of a tool that could really, again, assist and support the organizing efforts on the ground, on the grassroots level, and engage folks that even aren't connected necessarily with an organization, but to start from really access to knowledge that at many times has been very challenging, even for us, with stronger relationships to get access to certain data points. So, I think for specifically for a campaign like Seni, looking at budget, looking at equity, right? And understanding that budgets do reflect priorities, do reflect values, right? Whether at the district level and at the school level. And so engaging in that conversation, data plays a really big role in that. So really excited to see, this is just the beginning of an evolution to really bring transparency to the forefront and address access, right? And yeah, so as an advocate, as a partner, as an organizer, right? This is, I think, been really important. Mm-hmm. So I'll stop there.
Thanks for that, Laura. And now I'll pass it to Mark from the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools, who will provide some insight on some of their advocacy work as well.
Thank you. My name is Mark Wilson. I'm Director of Strategy and Operations at Partnership for Los Angeles Schools. And I kind of want to echo what's already been said and really thank Advancement Project for their work on this. They're truly leaders in the work to really build transparency and understanding to school and district budgeting. And I think this tool is a really strong example of that work. So at Partnership for LA Schools, we manage 19 LA Unified schools in Boyle Heights, Watts, and South LA. And we've worked closely with Advancement Project and many other orgs on the push for more equitable funding and investments in the highest need schools, in particular with a real big focus on using the Student Equity Needs Index as a way to drive equitable funding decisions at the district level, and really as a way to push out more funds and autonomy to the highest need schools. So for us, the first step in advocacy has always been about education. And we all know school and district budgets can be really complicated and confusing. And we also know that school budgets reflect our values, and where we invest our money reflects our values. And so we really think it's important and vital that all stakeholders whether that's school staff, parents, students, communities, have an understanding of where and how the dollars are being invested, both at the district level and at school sites. We're particularly excited about this platform. I think it'll allow us and other stakeholders to really get insight into not just one school's budget, but also see trends across the district. And we really feel like this opens up the ability for communities to be more involved in school decision-making, for partners to get greater insight into where dollars are going, and ultimately for all parties to support the district in its efforts to continue to align its budget more equitably. So again, I just wanted to thank the team that worked on this. I know it was a massive effort to compile all this data, and I know for sure it'll be a tool, a partnership that we will be returning to quite often, as well as our communities and our parents. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mark. I'd like to pass it on to our next speaker, Griselda Perez. She's an LAUSD parent and also active with the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools. Griselda, it's yours. Griselda, are you there?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Good morning, everybody. It's glad to see some familiar faces to me. And like I was saying, my name is Griselda Perez, and I am a parent volunteer at Roosevelt High School and Soto Street Elementary. 3 years ago, we took the decision to enroll our son in public school. We didn't believe in public education as an effective way to lead our son to succeed. So the first step that we took was getting involved in the school as a volunteer, and I realized their vision was my vision, which is to ensure academic achievement and empower tomorrow's leaders, our students, providing a dynamic and inspiring learning experience where all students graduate ready for success. Now I'm not only a mom who advocates for my son. The same passion that I used to volunteer is the same passion that I get when I use my voice to advocate for all those students that I have adopted as mine when I speak of Roosevelt or Soto Street Elementary. When I started looking at WeBudget tool, it was exciting for me because looking back, all these effort, meeting after meeting, gathering after gatherings at the district with community partners, LAUSD staff, and all that is like what Mark was saying. It was amazing data looking in one platform and easy to read and translate for those who can't even know how to read or speak in English. It was as a parent, it was really good to see. And it's a lot of information right there that I'm glad, and I would like to just tell all the parents and go back and see. And there's no better way to get involved and get to know what the district is doing for our schools, for our students. And so just keep moving forward. I remember those meetings back in 2018, like I was saying, when we just we were planning how the Seni is gonna work it out, how we're gonna work it out, and trying to make into simple words and equity, not equality. So this is what my experience, this is what I got, that all the children needs someone to look out for them, and here we are. And that's it. This is kind of like my experience, what I have as a parent, as an advocate, and good to see, like I said, good to see that all those many changes, additions, implementations, and modifications that we've been doing to just advocate and at our flag is our students, their future was its. And thank you.
Thanks for that, Griselda. And I'd like to pass along.
Sorry, could I forgot to include the student response.
Sure, of course, yeah. Of
I
course.
just wanted to share a quote, and I forgot to include it when I was speaking. A student who wanted to be on this call to share their just quick response to the platform. Stephanie Caceres, a student, 11th grader from Wilson High School, wanted to share that after reviewing the platform, she shared that I think for Wilson High School, they should invest their money in more resources for teachers and students, resources like newer textbooks, materials, and technology that would help students like me study better. As low-income students, we all can't always afford computers and complete our work at home, especially during COVID. Learning more about the budget and how my school is funded helps me push for more resources to get all my classmates to graduate at a rate of 100%, not 86.9%, which is included in the data, because we should all be graduating college ready. Another piece that data can help me or help with is addressing how our school can support smaller populations of non-Latinx students, for example, more targeted supports for Black students. So I just wanted to make sure to share her thoughts on it. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that. And I'll pass it along to our last speaker, Miguel Dominguez with Community Coalition. You've done a lot of work on LAUSD, and he can definitely provide some insights into how to actually break through into the district. Miguel, the floor is yours.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, everyone. First off, thank you, AP, for really taking the lead on creating this tool and for engaging us along the way, and our students and our parents. Hi, everyone. My name is Miguel Muniz. I'm the Director of Youth Programs at Community Coalition, and our organization has definitely done a lot of work around like educational equity, really in a way that really centers students and parents' voice in decision making, both on the policy level and on the budget level as well too, right? Because we know whenever we're pushing for policies, the budget piece is always like a make it or break it deal, right? Is this policy going to get implemented in a way where we actually fund it? And give it the budget necessary to be effective, or is it more going to be symbolic, right, without any real dollars attached to it? And so for us, making sure that we have student voice, student and parent voice is important, not only for engagement, but in a way that we actually give them some real power in decision making. And I think for us, the lack of transparency in budgeting has always been a strategy that has been employed as a way to like keep things hidden or to not like really implement policies really effectively, right? And so our students and our parents, like they understand what their experiences are. They understand that they don't attend equitable schools, and they know then they have proposals and solutions in terms of like how to move forward in a way that really addresses those problems. But oftentimes it's like this, the issue of the budget isn't as clear, right? And again, it's used as a barrier. And so what WeBudget really can do is kind of like equalize that playing field, right? Because oftentimes when folks talk about budget, it is presented by quote unquote experts to experts, right? In a way that like everyday people can understand. And then we did see this like in our campaign around the Seni, right? Where we actually had working groups that were open to the community, and oftentimes when data was presented, it was hard for like our students and our parents to like really make sense a lot of it. But definitely with the help of AP and really walking us through the data in very similar ways that WeBudget does. Like our students and their parents felt a lot more comfortable weighing in, and it really made a big difference in those working groups, and really asking some critical questions and being able to like help to like inform the development of the Seni and how those budget and how those dollars were allocated. So definitely, I think WeBudget is definitely a tool that we're going to continue to use because we know that our students and parents are experts, and they should be treated as so, right? And it's going to be critically important over the next period as well too, as we really fully realize the impact that budgets are going to have on schools. Right now, we're seeing a lot of decisions being made on budgets by decision makers without any real community voice, which feels a little frustrating, right? Because our parents and our students have definitely been weighing in over the last few years around around a lot of these pieces. And so for us, we're definitely going to use this tool to like really help understand. It's like, well, what are some of the budget decisions that are being made, and how do we weigh in, and how do we understand in the same way that the district is understanding, right? And we want to make sure that we continue to push for like those forums and those places for our community like weigh in, just because community engagement has to be critical. Centering students and voices has to be critical, and it can't be a new normal that we use urgency and a need to pivot fast as a way to like not include that community voice in it. And so definitely I'm really excited about the development of this tool and the ability to like have our students and our parents be able to like dig into information about their own schools, but like also gain some insight around the overall district as well. But yeah, thank you all again for definitely leading the charge around WeBudget.
Thanks for that, Miguel. I'll now pass it along to Mike to close us out and then provide some next steps on the website and information.
Great. So thanks to all the folks who shared this morning, and thank all of you for attending. You know, the site is open. It is live now. You can go to webudgetla.org and check everything out. Hopefully, you know, you'll be able to play around with it. Hopefully it'll answer some questions you've got and be of use to all the different kinds of work that you all do. We're glad to connect on it. There's a contact us email down there. So feel free to reach out if you've got ideas, thoughts, questions, anything else. I do know we weren't able to get questions that everybody asked, but we will send a follow-up email with the recording of the webinar and answers to some of those. I know there were some more technical questions about special ed and a few others, so glad to follow up with you about all of that. Once again, thank you so much. We know there is a lot happening right now. These are really important, significant times for us, you know, across the US and certainly here in LA. So appreciate you spending the morning with us. And again, we spent a lot of time on this. We spent a lot of effort listening to partners of community, but definitely there's more listening to do, more input to come. So hope to continue to collaborate with you all on moving towards equity. Thanks so much.